Welcome, scholars, to today's lesson, lesson 2-1.2, the Golden Horde. Today we're going to be taking a little longer look at the Mongols, and particularly what was going on with the Mongols in the West. But before we do that, we need to pick up our story where we left off. We left off with Genghis Khan, who had just received that title. Genghis Khan, remember this is Temujin, who had been the leader of a small clan or herder, and now he is the Mongol emperor. But at this point in time, that basically means that he's controlling this area up here, not a wealthy area, a somewhat large area geographically, but certainly not wealthy. And Genghis Khan is now ready to turn his attention to bigger and better things. Now, he is going to look down at China as the source of wealth that he is going to go for first, particularly the Jin Chinese. But we want to recognize that at this point, China is divided into three empires. We have the Tanguts, the Jin, and the Song. The Song we're going to deal with a whole lot later. Today we're going to run through the Tanguts and the Jin briefly. So the Jin were his primary target. This is a source of wealth. They're very wealthy, and Genghis Khan wants access to this. But first he's going to go after the weaker Tangut. He's going to do this for a very smart reason. He is not ready to attack the Jin. The Jin are very powerful, very populous, and very well defended, and he's not, his Mongol army is not up to this yet. But the Tanguts are weaker, still significantly stronger on paper than the Mongols. If you just look at the numbers, you look at the cities, the fortifications, the Tanguts should have been able to handle the Mongols. But Genghis Khan is an amazing leader. He learns how to fight. There's one instance where he's attacking a fortified city, the Tanguts, and he comes up with the idea of damming and diverting a river and flooding that city in order to take it. So he's very innovative, and he's coming up with all sorts of new ways to attack these places. So he is able to take out the Tanguts fairly quickly, and he then moves on to the Jin Chinese, who again, on paper, should easily been able to handle the Mongols, but due to their terror tactics and their lightning quick strikes, Mongols once again take out a much larger, much more powerful enemy. With both of these wars, the Mongols are now in control of northern China, all of North Central Asia. They are very wealthy because the Jin Chinese have been very wealthy. But the Mongols themselves are still thriving or thirsting for additional goods and greater treasures. But at this point, Genghis Khan is not actually looking for wealth through war. He's now in control of the Silk Road, the road that moves from China all the way to Constantinople. And he wants to be able to develop trade relationships with the Islamic world. He wants to now profit not through war, but through trade. And in order to do this, he sends 500 Mongol merchants to the Khwarezmian Empire, which is in modern-day Iran, and a few other Central Asian nations. This was a somewhat wealthy Islamic empire. The Islamic Empire was going through one of its fractious periods, and the Khwarezmian have taken over kind of the the eastern part of the old Islamic Empire. But they have very little respect for the Mongols. And they see these 500 merchants and all their goods, and they say, hey, easy pickings. We don't need to trade for these goods. Let's just take them. And that's what they do. And they kill all the merchants, and they take all the goods. And this does not sit very well with Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan, his history would lead us to believe he was kind of ready to settle down at this point. but he is violently vengeful against anybody who treats the Mongols in any other way other than, the Mongols being their superior. And when the Khwarezmian governor does this, Genghis Khan invades. He invades with about 200,000 men, and he's going up against an army of 400,000. So he was really outnumbered. But once again, Genghis Khan just proves that he's a military genius. He swarms into this empire, and in a period of about 5 years, destroys the entire thing. I mean, just utterly destroys everything that he sees. And his vengeance is really something. Now, I expect that this number is probably somewhat inflated, but I've come across in 2 different places. One of those places said is probably inflated. But they said the Khwarezmian Empire had about 15 million people in it at the time, and that within 5 years of Genghis Khan's invasion, the population of the region was down to about 400,000. There are reports of during one of these attacks, the son-in-law of Genghis Khan was killed. And Genghis Khan went to his widow, his own daughter, and said, "What should be the punishment for this city?" Her response, "Kill them all." The entire city was executed, and afterwards she ordered that the heads of all the men be formed into one giant pyramid, the heads of all the women into another, and the heads of all the children into a third. When that was done, they started in on the pets and the animals. Every living thing that was in the city was beheaded on the order of Genghis Khan's daughter. Now, this is one extreme example, but it's not too far off of how the Mongols treated those who treated the Mongols poorly. This Khwarezmian Empire had humiliated and insulted the empire, and Genghis Khan took no mercy when he went in there with his army. Well, once that westward expansion had begun, it continued. One of Genghis Khan's generals took this opportunity to travel a little further north, went out of Persia and explored a little bit north into Russia, had a small army with him. But with this small army, he was able to defeat several European armies and started to think the Europeans were weak and prime to be taken over. And later, actually just after the death of Genghis Khan, that would happen. The Mongols would expand northward in this direction. Now, Joch, who was the oldest son of Genghis Khan, was chosen to rule anything that was captured in the west. So this land would be his, and it's not going to fall to Joch. Joch dies too early to actually possess it, but his son, and then the descendants of his son, will eventually rule this area. And about 40 years after the death of Genghis Khan, there's actually a civil war within the entire Mongol Empire. Just take a look at this for a minute. Everything that was the Khanate of Persia, the Golden Horde, Jatatai, Mongol tribes, and later they will capture the Song dynasty as well. All of this becomes a part of the Mongol Empire. It's just huge, just absolutely huge, largest in world history. Well, this westernmost part is going to take the name the Golden Horde. And this is going to be the focus of the rest of this lesson. The Golden Horde was formed by the descendants of Joch, and they ruled this Khanate that was sometimes called the Golden Horde. It went by a couple of other names as well, the Kajitan Khanate, and a few other names, but we're going to go with Golden Horde. At its peak, it had conquered, not conquered, conquered nearly all of Russia and extended into Central Europe. You can really see that European map right here where it's pushing into what is modern-day Poland, and all the way south right here would be the line with the Danube River. That is traditionally seen as the furthest west that the Mongol Empire had moved. So the Danube River is kind of their furthest west extent, but this is pretty far into Europe, and definitely on the minds of everybody in the whole of the Roman Empire in France. They know of these Mongols by now, and they are just destroying everything in this area for almost 100 years. But everything that goes up must come down. The horde does start to decline. Several factors led to this. The Black Death was certainly one of them. The Mongols weren't hit quite as bad as Europe as a whole, but they certainly were hit hard. In the 1350s, the Golden Horde has its own civil war. It breaks into 4 separate khanates. They later reform, but they later also re-break. It's never really stable again. And this internal weakness starts to lead to many rebellions of the non-Mongol people, most notably the Russians. This eventually leads, of course, to the end of the Horde. The Golden Horde no longer exists today. These frequent rebellions led to frequent change in leadership of the Golden Horde, more fragmentation, which led to more rebellion. And by the mid-1400s, really, the Golden Horde no longer existed. Instead, it was 6 separate pieces, which, once they were no longer united, they were easy to pick off one by one. Although the last surviving one, the Crimean Khanate, did manage to hold on and did have a Mongol Khan in charge of it all the way up to 1783. So we're talking about 550 years of Mongol rulers in Europe. So quite an impact on the world, quite an impact on Europe. We're going to get a lot more into what's going on with them in the Islamic world, and especially China, a little bit later on. But I wanted to give you this European piece since that's been our focus in this class to this point. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.